Lila stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind tearing at her flannel shirt, whispering secrets she'd never dared to speak. Below, the Atlantic roared, as if it could drown out the ache in her chest, the ache of being erased, of being the daughter her family loved but never truly saw. She was 32, and she'd never been invited to a single family wedding, not as a guest, not as a sister, not as herself. Her mother's voice still echoed from that humid summer night 6 years ago, when Lila had sat at the kitchen table in their small Maine home, her hands trembling as she said, "I'm in love with a woman." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Her mother's face had hardened, her father's eyes had dropped to the floor, and her younger sister Claire had whispered, "You're ruining everything." That was the last time they'd spoken of it. The invitations to cousins' weddings, anniversaries, and reunions stopped coming. Lila became a ghost in her own family, loved in theory but exiled in practice. Now, standing on the cliff, she felt a hand slip into hers. Evelyn. Her Evelyn, with her sharp green eyes and a smile that could unravel the tightest knots in Lila's heart. At 30, Evelyn was a wildfire, bold, unapologetic, with a laugh that rang like church bells on a quiet morning. They'd met 2 years ago at a bookstore in Portland, when Evelyn's hand had brushed Lila's while reaching for the same dog-eared copy of Orlando. Their fingers lingered, their eyes locked, and in that moment, Lila felt something she hadn't in years seen. "Lila," Evelyn said now, her voice soft but steady, "you don't have to do this alone." The wind carried her words, weaving them into the crash of the waves. Lila turned to her, the weight of the letter in her pocket pressing against her thigh. It was an invitation not to a family wedding, but to her own. Hers and Evelyn's. The wedding her family would never attend. "I don't know if I can face them," Lila admitted, her voice cracking. "They'll never come. They'll never accept us." Evelyn squeezed her hand, her thumb tracing gentle circles. "Then we make our own family. We build something stronger than their silence." Lila wanted to believe her. But the letter in her pocket wasn't just an invitation, it was a declaration, a line in the sand. She'd written it herself, poured her heart into every word, knowing it might be the last thing she ever sent to her parents. She hadn't told Evelyn the full truth, that she wasn't just inviting her family to the wedding. She was planning something bigger, something unthinkable, something that could either heal her or break her forever. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of joy and dread. Lila and Evelyn had chosen a small venue, a weathered barn on the outskirts of Camden, with wildflowers spilling over the fields and the scent of salt in the air. They'd spent evenings planning, laughing over mismatched tablecloths and arguing about whether peonies or roses were more romantic. Evelyn had a way of making everything feel possible, her energy infectious, her optimism a lifeline. But at night, when Evelyn slept, Lila would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every rejection, every unanswered call. Her family's silence wasn't just absence, it was a wound. Growing up in a small, conservative town, Lila had always known she was different. She dated boys in high school, trying to fit the mold her parents expected, but it felt like wearing someone else's skin. When she finally came out at 26, it wasn't just about admitting she loved women, it was about claiming her right to exist as herself. Her parents hadn't disowned her outright, but their love came with conditions. They'd send birthday cards with no mention of her life, her love, her truth. They'd call, but only to talk about Claire's engagement or their church's bake sale. Lila was a shadow in their world, tolerated but never embraced. Evelyn, on the other hand, had grown up in a loud, chaotic family in Boston, where her queerness was met with shrugs and hugs. "They didn't get it at first," she told Lila once, her voice light but tinged with pain. "But they showed up. They always showed up." Lila envied that. She wanted to believe her family could change, that they could see her the way Evelyn's family saw her. But hope was a dangerous thing. The letter was her last attempt. She'd spent hours drafting it, her pen shaking as she wrote. "Mom, Dad, Claire, I'm getting married. To Evelyn. I want you there, not because I need your approval, but because I still love you. I'm not asking you to understand. I'm asking you to see me." She'd mailed it a month ago, and every day since, she'd checked the mailbox with a mix of hope and dread. No response. Not a call, not a text, not even a rejection. Just silence. Evelyn noticed the weight Lila carried. One evening as they sat on their porch, string lights glowing above them, Evelyn pulled Lila into her arms. "You're enough," she whispered, her lips brushing Lila's forehead. "You've always been enough." Lila buried her face in Evelyn's shoulder, the scent of her lavender shampoo grounding her. "What if they never come?" she asked, her voice muffled. "Then we'll dance without them," Evelyn said fiercely. "We'll dance and we'll love, and we'll build a life so beautiful they'll wish they'd been there." Lila wanted to believe her. But the plan forming in her mind, the unthinkable act she hadn't shared with Evelyn, was growing louder. It wasn't just about inviting her family. It was about forcing them to confront her, to see her, to acknowledge her existence. She didn't know if it would work, but she knew she couldn't keep living as a ghost. As the wedding day approached, Lila threw herself into preparations, trying to drown out the fear. She and Evelyn painted signs for the barn, practiced their vows, and argued over the playlist. Evelyn wanted indie folk. Lila insisted on classic soul. They laughed, they kissed, they built a world together. But every night, Lila's thoughts returned to the letter, to the silence, to the plan. One afternoon, while Evelyn was at work, Lila drove to her childhood home. The house looked smaller than she remembered, the paint peeling, the garden overgrown. She sat in her car, staring at the front door, her heart pounding. She wanted to knock, to demand answers, to beg them to come. But she didn't. Instead, she drove away, the weight of her plan pressing heavier. That night, she told Evelyn part of the truth. "I sent them the invitation," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They were curled up on the couch, a half-empty bottle of wine between them. Evelyn's eyes softened. "I know it hurts," she said, "but you're not alone anymore. You have me. You have us." Lila nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. The wedding was in 2 weeks. Her family hadn't responded. And the unthinkable act she was planning, the one she hadn't told Evelyn about, was starting to feel inevitable. The barn smelled of cedar and wildflowers, its wooden beams strung with fairy lights that flickered like stars against the dusk. Lila stood in the center, her boots scuffing the polished floor, as she imagined the wedding day. She could almost hear the music, feel Evelyn's hand in hers, see the guests smiling, everyone except her family. The past week had been a whirlwind. Evelyn's parents had flown in from Boston, their warmth filling the gaps Lila's own family left behind. They'd hugged her, called her daughter, and helped arrange chairs in the barn, their laughter easing the ache in her chest. But every kind word from them was a reminder of what she didn't have. Her parents' silence was a blade, cutting deeper with each passing day. Lila hadn't told Evelyn about her visit to her childhood home. She hadn't told her about the plan, either the one that kept her awake at night, the one that felt both reckless and necessary. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about reclaiming her place in a family that had pushed her away. She'd spent years shrinking herself, apologizing for who she was. No more. Evelyn burst into the barn, her blonde hair catching the light as she carried a box of mason jars. "These are for the centerpieces," she said, grinning. "Think we can make them look rustic chic without going full Pinterest disaster?" Lila laughed, the sound loosening the knot in her chest. "You're the artist here. I'm just along for the ride." Evelyn set the box down and crossed the room, wrapping her arms around Lila's waist. "You're more than that," she said, her voice low and warm. "You're my home." Lila's throat tightened. She wanted to tell Evelyn everything, the plan, the fear, the hope that kept her tethered to her family despite their rejection. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she kissed Evelyn slow and deep, letting the moment anchor her. The next day, Lila drove to the post office, her hands shaking as she mailed a second letter. This one wasn't an invitation. It was a plea, a challenge, a last stand. "I'm not asking you to come to the wedding anymore," she'd written. "I'm asking you to see me. If you don't, I'll bring the wedding to you." She didn't know if they'd read it, but the act of sending it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Back at their apartment, Evelyn was on the phone with the caterer, her voice rising as she argued about vegan options. Lila watched her, marveling at how effortlessly Evelyn moved through the world. She was fearless in a way Lila had never been, unafraid to demand space, to exist loudly. Lila envied that, but it also terrified her. What if her plan went too far? What if it cost her Evelyn? That night they sat on the floor, surrounded by fabric swatches and seating charts. Evelyn leaned against Lila, her head resting on her shoulder. "What's going on in that head of yours?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing. Lila hesitated. "I'm just scared," she admitted. "Not about us. About them." Evelyn sat up, her green eyes searching Lila's face. "Your family." Lila nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of a fabric swatch. "I keep thinking maybe they'll show up. Maybe they'll change. But what if they don't?" Evelyn took Lila's hand, her grip firm. "Then we make our own family. We fill that barn with people who love us, who see us. You don't need their permission to be happy." Lila wanted to believe her, but the plan was burning a hole in her mind. She hadn't told Evelyn about the second letter, or what she intended to do if her family didn't respond. It wasn't just about bringing the wedding to them, it was about forcing them to confront her truth, in a way they couldn't ignore. She didn't know if it was courage or desperation, but it was all she had left. The days blurred together, each one bringing them closer to the wedding. Lila threw herself into the preparations, trying to outrun her doubts. She and Evelyn painted signs, taste-tested cakes, and practiced their first dance in the living room, tripping over each other's feet and laughing until they couldn't breathe. But the silence from her family was deafening. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Evelyn handed Lila a small box. "Open it," she said, her eyes bright with mischief. Inside was a silver locket, engraved with a tiny wave. Lila opened it to find a photo of them, taken on their first date a rainy afternoon at a lighthouse, their faces pressed close under an umbrella. Tears pricked Lila's eyes. "I know it's hard," Evelyn said, her voice soft. "But this is us. This is our story. And no one can take that away." Lila clutched the locket, her resolve hardening. She couldn't keep living in the shadow of her family's rejection. The plan was risky, but it was hers, and she was done waiting for their approval. The night before the wedding, Lila couldn't sleep. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Evelyn, and sat at the kitchen table, the locket in her hand. She thought of her mother's tight-lipped smile, her father's averted eyes, Claire's whispered accusations. She thought of the years she'd spent trying to be the daughter they wanted, the sister they could love. She thought of Evelyn, who saw her, who chose her, who loved her without conditions. The plan was set. Tomorrow at the wedding, she would do the unthinkable. She would bring her family into her world, whether they wanted to be there or not. It wasn't just about them, it was about her. About claiming her place, her love, her life. She looked at the locket, at the photo of her and Evelyn, and felt a spark of courage. Tomorrow she would be seen. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, the main sky a brilliant blue that stretched endlessly over the fields. Lila stood in front of the mirror, her dress a simple ivory gown with lace sleeves feeling both foreign and right. Evelyn was in the next room, her laughter filtering through the walls as her sister helped her with her veil. Lila's heart ached with love, but the weight of her plan pressed against her chest. She hadn't told Evelyn. She couldn't. Not because she didn't trust her, but because this was something Lila had to do alone. The second letter had gone unanswered, just like the first. Her family's silence was a confirmation. They weren't coming. But Lila wasn't done with them yet. The barn was alive with activity when Lila arrived. Guests milled about, their voices a warm hum against the soft strumming of a guitar. Evelyn's family had outdone themselves, decorating with wildflowers and candles, transforming the rustic space into something magical. Lila's best friend Mara was there, adjusting table settings and winking at Lila whenever their eyes met. Mara had been her rock through the years of family silence, the one who'd shown up when no one else did. As Lila walked through the barn, she felt a pang of absence. No parents, no sister, no cousins, just the empty chairs she'd reserved for them, a quiet hope she hadn't quite let go of. She touched the locket at her neck, the one Evelyn had given her, and took a deep breath. The plan was in motion. There was no turning back. The ceremony began as the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow through the barn's open doors. Evelyn walked down the aisle first, her white suit tailored to perfection, her blonde hair catching the light like a halo. The guests gasped, but Lila only had eyes for her. Evelyn's smile was a beacon pulling Lila through the fear, the doubt, the weight of what she was about to do. When it was Lila's turn, she felt every eye on her. She walked slowly, her heart pounding, her dress whispering against the floor. Evelyn's eyes never left hers, and in that moment, Lila felt whole. The officiant, a friend from their bookstore days, began the ceremony, her voice warm and steady. They exchanged vows, Evelyn's bold and poetic, Lila's quiet but fierce. The guests laughed, cried, clapped. But Lila's mind was elsewhere, counting down to the moment she'd planned. After the vows, the officiant announced the first dance. The band struck up a slow, soulful rendition of Etta James's At Last. Evelyn pulled Lila close, their bodies swaying in perfect rhythm. "You're shaking," Evelyn whispered, her breath warm against Lila's ear. "I'm okay," Lila lied, her hands tightening on Evelyn's waist. She glanced at the empty chairs, her family's absence of physical weight. But she wasn't done yet. The reception was in full swing when Lila slipped away. Guests were dancing, clinking glasses, laughing under the fairy lights. Evelyn was in the middle of it all, twirling Mara across the floor, her laughter echoing. Lila's heart swelled, but her resolve was stronger. She grabbed her phone and stepped outside, the cool night air a shock against her skin. She'd arranged everything weeks ago. A small van parked just beyond the barn held a projector and a screen. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Photos of her and Evelyn, of their life together. Their first date at the lighthouse. Their late-night talks on the porch. Their quiet moments, their loud ones, their love in all its messy, beautiful glory. And mixed in were photos of Lila's family, her parents at her high school graduation, Claire at her first piano recital, the four of them at Christmas before everything changed. The plan was simple but unthinkable. She would project these photos not here at the wedding but at her childhood home. She would bring her love, her life, her truth to their doorstep. She drove alone, the van rattling over the winding roads. Her heart pounded as she pulled up to her parents' house. The same peeling paint, the same overgrown garden. It was late but the lights were on. They were home. She set up the projector in the yard, her hands trembling as she connected it to her phone. The screen glowed and the first photo appeared. Her and Evelyn, laughing under the umbrella at the lighthouse. Lila stood in the shadows watching as the photos played. Her parents' faces, young and smiling, mixed with hers and Evelyn's. The contrast was stark, her family's past, her present, her future. She didn't know if they'd see it, if they'd care, but she needed them to know. She was here, she was real, she was happy. The front door opened. Her mother stepped out, her face pale in the glow of the projector. Lila froze, her breath catching. Her mother's eyes widened as she saw the photos, saw Lila and Evelyn's love splashed across the screen. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Lila," her mother whispered, her voice breaking. Lila stepped forward, her heart in her throat. "I'm here," she said. "I've always been here." Lila's mother stood frozen on the porch, her silhouette framed by the warm light spilling from the house. The projector hummed softly, casting images of Lila's life across the screen, her and Evelyn dancing in their kitchen, their hands intertwined on a hiking trail, their faces pressed close in a selfie. Mixed in were memories of Lila's childhood, her mother braiding her hair, her father teaching her to ride a bike, Claire chasing her through the yard. The juxtaposition was deliberate, a bridge between the past and the present Lila had fought so hard to claim. "Lila," her mother said again, her voice trembling. "What is this?" Lila's throat tightened but she stepped closer, the grass cold beneath her shoes. "It's me," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "It's my life. My love. I wanted you to see it." Her mother's eyes flicked to the screen, where a photo of Lila and Evelyn at a pride parade glowed, Evelyn's arm around Lila, both of them laughing, rainbow flags in the background. Her mother's face tightened, and for a moment, Lila thought she'd turn away, retreat back into the house, into the silence. But then her father appeared in the doorway, his glasses glinting in the light. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice gruff but uncertain. He saw the screen, saw the photos, and his shoulders slumped. "Lila." She waited, her heart pounding. She'd spent years imagining this moment, rehearsing what she'd say if they ever faced her. But now, standing here, she felt exposed, raw like a wound that had never healed. "I got married today," she said, her voice breaking. "To Evelyn. I invited you. I begged you to come. You didn't." Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Her father looked at the ground, his hands shoved in his pockets. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable, until Claire appeared behind them, her face pale. "You're doing this here?" Claire said, her voice sharp. "At our house? On your wedding day?" "I had to," Lila said, her voice rising. "You wouldn't come to me. You wouldn't see me. So I brought myself to you." The projector shifted to a photo of Lila alone, standing on the cliff where she and Evelyn had first held hands. Her face was soft, vulnerable, but her eyes were fierce. Her mother's tears spilled over, and she took a step forward. "We didn't know how," her mother whispered. "We didn't know how to accept this." Lila's chest ached, but she held her ground. "You didn't try," she said. "You erased me. You loved me, but only the parts you could stomach. I'm not a piece of me. I'm all of me." Her father looked up, his eyes glistening. "We didn't want to lose you," he said, his voice barely audible. "Then why did you let me go?" Lila asked, tears streaming down her face. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The projector looped back to the beginning, the photo of Lila and Evelyn at the lighthouse. Lila's mother stared at it, her hands trembling. Then slowly she walked down the steps, crossing the yard to stand in front of Lila. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Lila wanted to collapse into her arms, to feel the warmth she'd missed for years. But she didn't. "Not yet. I needed you today," she said. "I needed my family." Her mother reached out, her hand hovering before resting lightly on Lila's arm. Can we still be your family?" Lila's heart twisted. She wanted to say yes, to forgive, to heal. But it wasn't that simple. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm here. I'm trying." Lila drove back to the wedding, her hands shaking on the wheel. The confrontation had drained her, but it had also freed something inside her. She'd done the unthinkable, brought her truth to their doorstep, forced them to see her. Whether they'd change, whether they'd try, was out of her hands now. But she'd reclaimed her voice, her place, her right to exist. When she pulled up to the barn, the party was still alive, music spilling into the night. Evelyn was on the dance floor, her suit jacket off, her sleeves rolled up, laughing with Mara. She saw Lila and froze, her smile faltering. "Where were you?" Evelyn asked, crossing the room in quick strides. "I was worried." Lila took a deep breath, the weight of the night settling into her bones. "I need to tell you something," she said, pulling Evelyn outside. Under the stars, Lila told her everything: the second letter, the projector, the confrontation. Evelyn listened, her face shifting from shock to anger to something softer, deeper. When Lila finished, Evelyn pulled her into a fierce hug. "You should have told me," Evelyn said, her voice muffled against Lila's hair. "I would have gone with you." "I know," Lila said, her arms tightening around Evelyn. "But I had to do it alone. I had to face them." Evelyn pulled back, her eyes searching Lila's. "And now we dance," Lila said, a small smile breaking through her tears. "We live. We love. No matter what they do." Evelyn kissed her slow and deep, the world falling away. They returned to the barn, hand in hand, and joined the dance floor. The music swelled, and Lila felt something shift inside her, a weight lifting, a space opening. She wasn't whole yet, but she was closer. The reception stretched into the early hours, the barn glowing with warmth and laughter. Lila and Evelyn danced until their feet ached, surrounded by friends who felt like family, their love a shield against the world. But Lila's mind kept drifting to her parents' house, to her mother's tears, her father's quiet guilt, Claire's sharp words. She'd done the unthinkable, and now she had to live with the consequences. As the night wound down, guests began to leave, their hugs and well wishes lingering in the air. Evelyn's parents pulled Lila into a tight embrace, their love a balm to her raw heart. Mara slipped her a note that read, "You're a badass. Never forget it." Lila laughed, tucking it into her pocket next to the locket. When the last guest left, Lila and Evelyn stood alone in the barn, the fairy lights casting soft shadows. Evelyn took Lila's hand, her thumb brushing over the new ring on Lila's finger. "We did it," she said, her voice soft but triumphant. "We did," Lila said, her heart full. But there was one last thing she needed to do. The next morning, Lila and Evelyn sat at their kitchen table, coffee steaming between them. The locket lay open on the table, the photo of their first date a reminder of how far they'd come. Lila's phone buzzed, and her heart stopped when she saw the name. Claire. The message was short. I saw the photos. I'm sorry. Can we talk? Lila stared at the screen, her hands trembling. Evelyn reached over, squeezing her hand. You don't have to decide now, she said. You've done enough. But Lila knew she wasn't done. She'd spent years hiding, shrinking, apologizing. Last night she'd stepped into the light, and she couldn't go back. She typed a reply, yes. Let's talk. Weeks later, Lila met Claire at a small cafe in Portland. The air was tense, but Claire's eyes were softer than Lila remembered. I didn't know how to handle it, Claire admitted, stirring her coffee. I was scared. Thought you were breaking us. Lila's chest tightened, but she held Claire's gaze. I wasn't breaking us. I was trying to be me. Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. I want to try, she said. I want to know you. The real you. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. Lila's parents were slower to reach out, their calls hesitant, their words careful. But they were trying, and that was more than Lila had ever expected. Months later, Lila and Evelyn stood on the same cliff where they'd first held hands, the ocean roaring below. They were different now, stronger, surer. Their love tempered by the fire of that night. Lila's family wasn't fully in her life, but the door was open, a crack of light in the darkness. You did the unthinkable, Evelyn said, her arm around Lila's waist. You made them see you. Lila leaned into her, the locket warm against her chest. I made myself see me, she said. And you helped. They stood there watching the waves, their hands intertwined. The world wasn't perfect, and neither was their story. But it was theirs, and it was enough. The unthinkable act hadn't just been about confronting her family. It had been about claiming her place in the world, about refusing to be erased. Lila had spent years as a ghost, but now she was solid, real, alive. And as she kissed Evelyn under the setting sun, she knew she'd never be invisible again. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.